Hello, everybody. Hello again, and welcome to this latest episode of Roll Insight. So, this is the fourth episode. We are going to be talking about episodes 4 of both the Mockeries and the Reserve List, and about a little lost episode, which is never going to see the light of day. And I will go into why and all of the DM stuff and just human stuff that I have learned from that particular experience. So I'm going to roll my insight as the gimmick for this show. And that's a 7. So that is markedly better than the last few weeks, but still very bad. The insight you're getting is terrible. But let's begin. So I wanted to talk about the Mockeries episode 4. Now, the Mockeries episode 4 began the No, they already went to Merleystone. So it's the second episode of Merleystone. It's Madame Mad's Augury Auction, of course. And I was told by my players who watched this episode last week and watched and knew the schedule of the episodes coming out that I did, in fact, give major spoilers for this episode in last week's episode. So my apologies for that. These things sometimes blur together, and those two episodes were filmed as part of one session back then as well. So I'm trying really hard not to let the glare enter my glasses, but you can just see it. So I'm just not going to worry too much about it. Yeah, so I basically gave spoilers for things that they learn in this episode last time. They rush over to the hospital. They go to the Green Coven Hospital. They interact with the receptionist. They go in ready to confront Orlando Coin. And this was a part that I found really interesting. Was they didn't attack him straight away. The charm person on the receptionist was so good, and it actually allowed me to showcase some of the consequences of that spell a little bit better, which was sort of the idea. So not hopefully, I imagined that they will think twice before they use the charm person spell all willy-nilly again without taking into account its downsides, because it is a first level spell. Nevertheless, they go and confront Orlando Coin, and Orlando uses his insider knowledge about the priestess of Malar to basically talk his way out of the building. And I thought that Thesia would just try to kill him. I thought that she would not send Theremin away. I thought that Cloud would be waiting, and I thought that they would just try to kill him. But he, being caught off guard and not being able to finish off this guy he wanted to finish off, he just talked his way out of that situation, which was great, which meant that the rest of the conflict with Merleystone could continue in the way that I had planned. Yes, all part of the plan, as we well know. This is a professional show that I run. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. So yeah, they learn a bit about that. They went and did some other bits and bobs in this episode, and really, this episode is leading further towards conflicts down the road. So this is sort of a raising of the stakes. This is where Matt Shesha comes and talks to Thesia about her sort of trials that will be taking place in order to become the champion of Malar, which is her goal. And then Theramin's dad, Balzabul, talks to him in his very funny voice about his goals and being a classic patron that wants something from their warlock. But that is complicated, obviously, in this situation by the fact that they are father and son. I think Callum is first of all, Callum's taken to this game like a fish to water. He completely gets everything about it and is such a good role player. I'm so impressed every single time. Every single time we play together. I'm like, I forget how little experience he actually has with the game because he's that good. But I think, yeah, he plays that perfectly, where it's that idea that his dad's saying to him, your successes are my successes. Whatever you do reflects on me, in that very toxic parental relationship that perhaps people know about. Just very indicative of some real relationships. And he going, no, it's me getting this done. And, and maybe that's something that will continue to be explored in the future, is how much of Thurman's success is his own skill versus this magic that he has technically sold his soul for, which is an interesting query. And then they both realized, oh no, we may end up fighting one another down the line. And I promised them in game, but like more adamantly out of game, I said, don't worry, we're not going to be doing direct PvP between the two of you for a little bit. This is a setup for that conflict. But we may get there. And then setting off into the mountains and playing with the Goliaths, which is so sweet. It's so sweet that they played for those Goliaths, whose personality I sort of made up on the fly, but it works really well, I think. Especially for the lore of this sort of world and stuff. You guys will see as the next couple episodes progress how Merle Stone progresses. But yes, in terms of setup for things going forward and raising the stakes, this was an important episode. It showed that people can and will be killed if they do not act, and starts to set up sort of the bigger conflicts around this game. Not only this particular arc of Race to the Battle of the Bands, but this is not a level 1 through level 20 campaign, so there is wiggle room for these characters to return and do other story arcs as part of the channel, which I think we fully expect to do. So, all things being well. So that's very exciting. The Reserve List episode 4. Now, the Reserve List episode 4 sees them coming for the first time into this new town called Rithertell. And this was one of those things where I need to be better at disappointing my players. I don't like it. I don't like doing it. The reason I don't like doing it is because people have a lot more fun when they are succeeding, and it makes the lot, like when people lose, it makes those losses stand out more starkly. If you have a track record of gathering intelligence and things going, not without hurdles, but things working out for the most part, and then something doesn't work out, that hurts a lot more than, oh man, we're just never making things work. So in any case, what all of that was a preamble to the fact that they busted my mystery wide open really quickly, with some good insight checks. And the other thing that happened that I want to talk about with that episode was the fact that Julian's character, Tom Barr, was sort of out of the running for part of it. I didn't like doing that. I set up things in world. I gave people enough in-game context to know there's a risk involved to this. And I would sort of have this idea that either they would not suspect anything and they would all get drunk and they would all be completely knocked out and the money would be gone in the morning, or that no one would. But when it was just Julian's character who took the mugshot, I was like, oh no, it's just one person who was just going to be completely asleep for all of this stuff. Yeah, so that was, Julian was like, I never want to not participate in an episode again. And I'm like, especially for a new player, I'm like, I completely understand that and how that got wiggy, but but there were reasons for it, and he understood. And going forward, I will not put that on anybody again. The Reserve List episode 4 also began an interesting discussion for the first time, like sort of amongst players, which is the idea of race, and not just D&D races, as in Dragonborn versus elves versus dwarves, but also of human against human race, and the ethnicity of various people in this world of Sygalia. So I can very quickly run through some ethnicities for people in this world building, if you're interested. The Garandians have an Italian Greek inspired skin tone and genetic makeup. The Arohani, the people from Arohan, are more deep brown skin, sort of Mediterranean, an East Indian sort of vibe to them. And in the north, in Verano, the Veronese are more Asian, sort of lighter skin, almond eyes, black hair, that kind of thing. So, in terms of these very broad, general sort of archetypes of race, these races are not meant to be indicative of any real world race. I'm not interested in doing racial commentary that is directly related to the world as is. Obviously, race is going to play a part in these stories because people are from different countries and have different beliefs. And my biases may shine through at times. I am only human. I am a creative. I will always do my best to frame things, frame arguments that are not my own in a way which I believe to be believable for those characters, because those characters believe the things that they believe. But huge disclaimer for the whole thing, I believe in love and connection between human beings, no matter what you look like or what you believe in. And if that shines through, it's not because I think Italian/Greek people are better than East Indian people. That's not the case at all. I'm more interested in looking at a political structure, a organized religious structure, and the tensions that can arise between different members of different countries and different peoples. If that makes sense. Whew. Yeah. So there is that. And that says nothing of Volpikar. I have actually just been doing a little bit of world building work for season 2 of the official series, of the official sort of God Heist series, which will be called the 10th Kingdom. And just sort of like covering this gap and stuff. I won't really go into it now, but it has been a lot of fun to restructure the society of the Great Orthodoxy left off. This is, if you only watch Race to the Battle of the Bands, my apologies. This is God Heist related stuff. This is some world building stuff I get really excited about. And this new Orcish kingdom as well, which has been established over on Volpikar. For those of you who don't know, Sygalia is the world on which the Race to the Battle of the Bands is set, and the vast majority of the stories that we are going to be telling are set. But there is a second world that is very closely linked now to Sygalia. It's another fantasy world, sort of has its own rules, different cosmology, different magics, different races, all of this stuff, called Volpikar. And the plot of God Heist was people from Sygalia discovering this other fantasy world and going over and interacting with those people and what their religions and differences were. So Race to the Battle of the Bands. They they broke my My mystery apart, the Blink Dogs are not the real threat in that town. Super spoilers. No, the dogs are just looking for their pups who have been taken. And then, of course, we have to talk about the Men in the Iron Masks. In terms of the Men in the Iron Masks, I knew going into the second episodes for the two that I run that while the first one has very, very sort of encompasses itself and sort of has references to one of the major shadowy overarching evils that these guys may be facing. The second episode, I wanted to introduce a more personal villain, a more personal overarching storyline for these individual groups. And so obviously on the Mockery side, we have the Yuan-Ti and the priests and priestesses of Malar, as well as the Nine Hells, who are sort of in this conflict, and that is sort of a more personal overarching thing. But with the reserve list, we actually had I wanted to have something else and something a little bit more tied in. Now, because we've got new players and because the focus of these players is a little bit less on backstory coming to play and stuff, only one person in that group we actually worked together and said, this is the backstory and this is the stuff that you want to sort of be dealing with as this goes on. Fair enough. So I'm going to tie that a little bit into them and build enough in that is relevant to everybody else. I have specific plans for somebody in the reserve list, and it might not be who you think it is. But yeah, I wanted to bake that in. And so the Men in the Iron Masks are that secondary overarching threat. And having them say some things which may tie back in to the previous one is just a little spice. So the way it'll kind of goes, we'll sort of flip-flop between one-offs with villains who have their own sort of goals and are sort of standalone on their, and then we will have an episode dedicated perhaps to this first organization, and then an episode to this other organization. Not that it'll always be that clean, but the balance is sort of that. So, having spoken about all those things, let's talk about the lost episode. Now, I'm going to roll into a story here. I'm going to leave out people's names because they've asked to, and sort of go into privacy and into some personal sides of a story here. From my perspective, this episode, once again, is not going to be aired on the channel in any form. And I will explain why. So Neil asked me to stand in for him as sort of a substitute DM for the narcissistic tendencies, which was wonderful. I got to meet the cast, reconnect with those members of the cast that I knew, and meet those members that I had not met. And that was a fantastic experience. The narcissistic tendencies are fantastic role players, and you should watch that show. As of the recording of this video, those episodes are down for maintenance, but in a few days' time, I think 3 days, it'll be before the first episode is re-uploaded. The reason those are being re-uploaded is because I wanted to give them a fresh coat of paint. Neil wanted to make them even better. A better viewing experience for you. So I, also being a viewer of the narcissistic tendencies and a lover of that show and that group, I can't wait to see what they do. I fully don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm told to be excited by my fellow creatives. So you and I together can wait in anticipation for that. I am with you. I am a fan of certain shows on my channel that I don't run. I get it both ways. It's so good. It's so good. Yes, and essentially what happened was Neil wanted to bring on a new person, and sort of the new model of this channel, as opposed to sort of copying Critical Role and copying all of these other very successful series, is to go more of the Dimension 20 route and to have an anthology of different casts with different characters coming to this and doing shorter seasons, rather, of different series. Now, the thing is, forgive me, I keep losing my train of thought, especially when I do these videos. So we have, and we decided to do that, and that was the way we were going to build a larger community with this channel. And that's the goal, is to get more people involved, more talented people who have skills that we do not possess. I know certainly there are many skills which would be incredibly useful to have for any YouTube channel, but especially a D&D channel, that I fully do not possess. I like playing, I like creating the stories, I currently do some of the editing. I wish there was somebody who was better at that we had on board. But Neil wanted to bring somebody on who was incredibly talented. Just on paper, just the most perfect person we could bring on of all time. Just fantastic. And that was really exciting. And what happened was we sort of brought them fully into the fold before playing with them. For anybody who is out there, and you can see where this story is going. We brought this person fully into the fold and talked to them through messages online. And Neil, I fully wasn't supposed to be there, but Neil said, "Hey, Josh, can you stand in DM for me this time round?" And I said, "Sure, I don't mind doing that. It will be a good, fun thing. I'll do a one-shot." And decided that we would keep the band members as their characters going into this one-shot. And I was basically going to do a fun little storyline to introduce this new player's character so that they could join the band and keep going. Now, what I thought would be fun was, and what I proposed was, a storyline in which this player would be part of a band whose leader is such a terrible person that they would want to leave and join the much cooler narcissistic tendencies. And they said that would be okay, and we were in agreement, and that was great. And I was so I thought that we had a sort of an accord there. DMing the narcissistic tendencies is a very different thing from DMing my other groups. We don't have the same understandings, the same rapports, because Neil runs a very different game than I do, and that is completely fine. I think it's very important that every DM have their own style, and they will have their own style no matter what. But these players were obviously used to a particularly different kind of DMing style, and I could not herd anybody where I wanted them to go. Not that I was trying to railroad anything, but the offerings that I was making, people made character decisions which made a lot of sense, which were basically, no, we're not going to have a band off with this person's band who's sort of this nonsense and just a terrible lord. No, we're going to insult him and try to steal his stuff and run him out of town. And that was hilarious. And damn it, I wish we could air this episode for that specifically, because that was a great beginning to the episode. And the first couple of scenes that I role played with this person worked really well. And when I talked to them before going in and sort of like walked through, sort of talked to them just in person to get to know them a little bit before the show, they were absolutely fantastic. But then something happened, which was here's the point. I'm going to make the point before I tell the rest of the story. The point is, when you are playing Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of people will tell you that the most important thing about role-playing your character is to do what that character would do. But what you're going to find as you go through more and more YouTube videos about being a player, specifically, about Dungeons and Dragons, and the more you play, hopefully, is the real trick to being a player is to do what your character would do within the context of the story being told and what is appropriate for the story being told. And here's the other thing. And I come from an acting background, right? I've been through drama school. I have worked professionally in the industry. I've worked professionally with a lot of people and a lot of different types of actors. There's a particular mindset which is very amateurish, and it can come out in Dungeons and Dragons, and it doesn't necessarily get nipped in the bud as quickly as it does during drama school or acting classes, which is the idea that if you are immersed in your character, the character can take responsibility for what happens at the table. If you, if you're playing this sort of superior wizard character, and you see somebody who you just don't like, and you decide to burn them alive to a crisp with a fireball spell, that the wizard somehow made that decision on their own, and you, the player, had nothing to do with it. This is obviously completely false, and this is why people like Jared Leto get so much flack for what he was doing behind the scenes on Suicide Squad. Is that it does not matter if you are in the persona of the Joker, sending things to other people, particularly disgusting things to other people who you are working with, is not okay. And it is Jared Leto who is doing those things, not the Joker, because the Joker would be blowing up Gotham. So what happened was there was a miscommunication between players in this episode, and one player that they were sort of showing off against each other. They were sort of puffing out their chests, and they kept escalating it. I'm going to down a shot. Well, I will down 2 shots. Okay. Well, I'll jump up on this counter. Well, I'm going to wrap you in arms of Hadar tentacles that don't do any damage, but just wrap you in this necrotic magic. Now, one person, the new person we brought on, believed this to be an attack and an assault, and interpreted it in a particular way, which created a victim narrative, and would not back down or compromise from their position at all. And what naturally transpired after that was PvP, which I hadn't wanted to have happen, and I wasn't expecting to have happen, but I thought to myself, well, everybody knows where the story is going. These people are going to end up in a band together, and so everyone knows that is the story, and therefore PvP won't last very long. I was wrong about that. Again, for this sort of reason where the person could not justify their character backing down from this situation, or having anything but hatred for people who would attack them. And the situation continued to spiral a little bit. I managed to pull the situation together after a little bit far too long in PvP, but we managed to get it back together before the end of the episode, have an ending to the episode, and left it there. And here's another thing that I will say for DMs and players alike is when something happens in game, if you need to address it outside of game, address it privately with your DM, address it privately with the other person. because and do whatever you need to do to make it clear that you were not comfortable or happy with what happened, and have a frank, honest discussion about how you can move forward. If apologies need to be made, we'll, let people make those apologies. But if apologies, and even if apologies aren't necessary, just find out, make sure that you understand where the other person is coming from, make sure they understand where you're coming from, and then let it go. And then fully let it go and go back to being to being able to work. That's how you work together, is to be able to let things that come up flow away. And if you can't, then the following happens. This person was in a group chat with all of us and refused to let what happened in-game go. They kept repeating their arguments as though we had not understood, which we clearly had. We were trying to find solutions going forward, but they thought that they would have to completely retire this character and bring a new one in. There was a lot of blame that was thrown around in private between me and this person when I was trying to negotiate with them and talk to them. And there was a general inability to communicate. And regardless of what other differences people have, if I spend 4 hours talking to you and haven't been able to get through to you at all, and you've been listening to me, and nothing I say is making you want to come back, and you're delivering ultimatums that are the conditions for your return when you've made everybody else uncomfortable and antagonized everybody else by shifting things to issues that they weren't about and didn't have to be about, then and are unwilling to find compromise, then we cannot work together. And that's what happened. This new person made it very clear that they could not work together collaboratively with us, and that was a real shame. It was a real shame because, again, they are a very talented person, and I hope that you, who know who you are, if you are out there and if you are still watching, I'm very sorry things didn't work out, and I hope genuinely that you find a play group that you are comfortable with and who are comfortable with you, and have a good time playing this game, because it's not meant to be exclusionary. It's just there are certain environments that you do not want to create for yourself and your friends. So that's what that was. They asked that the episode not be aired, which seemed absolutely fair. So that episode is officially non-canon now, and will never see the light of day. And those story elements that I used in there, I guess I'm free to use in other things. So I'm going to. Obviously, that person's character is their own. That person's character will not appear as an NPC in world. And all of the various gags and things that were thrown in for the narcissistic tendencies. Honestly, it's probably a good thing that Neil's vision for that group is the only one that is going forward. That's why I meant it to be a one-shot anyway. But yeah, I think it was a fun game that went off the rails and could have been salvaged had everybody wanted to be cooperative together. And because that was not the case, because there was such a lack of communication happening between myself and this person and everyone else, and this person, very clearly from my conversations with the other creatives here at the channel on various groups, that person made everybody very nervous and just apprehensive about playing. That's never an environment that you want, and it's not one that you can tolerate or foster. And so if anybody out there is stuck in a play group where they are a player and they don't enjoy the DM, or they don't enjoy the way another player is working, again, just try to be as direct as you can, communicate as clearly as possible why you are uncomfortable. Try to make your position clear, try to understand the positions that are brought up by those other people. And if those are just incompatible, then there are other D&D groups for you out there. Not everybody's going to play this game the same way, but everybody's fun is valid. They can find people who can join them in the same type of fun they would like to have. And on that note, thank you so much for watching another episode of Roll Insight. I had a little bit more to say, a little bit more going on in the background this time around. Please tune in this coming week for episodes 5 of both the Mockeries and the Reserve List. And look forward to another one of these episodes of Roll Insight Race to the Battle of the Bands, discussing them when they are out. Obviously, the day that this episode comes out, these Roll Insight episodes have been wildly varied. Just know that they will come out before the next week's episode. I always intend to get them out by Saturday, but this Saturday stuff was happening. Personal, private stuff. So yeah, once again, thank you all very much. And I hope that you are doing very well and taking care of yourself and others during these times. Goodbye, all.